Testing, testing. Recording. See how we're doing here.
Hello, Vera. Can you hear me?
Hey, hello. Yes, I can.
Hang on 1 second. Let me figure out why my text not working. Can you talk for me?
Oh, hello. Testing. Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can. And my camera was not on. Here we are. It's morning.
Hey.
on a Friday.
Yo. What do we got? We doing a White Russian? What's for breakfast?
Oh gosh, wouldn't that be rock star? No, it's just a coffee.
It's like a stout, something like that.
It is. It's a pod coffee that you put over ice. I'm like really living that glamorous rock and roll lifestyle right now.
Hey, dude. Yeah, that's what it's about. So, where are you in Washington? Is it Seattle?
I'm in Seattle.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, never been out that way. I've heard it's beautiful. Pacific Northwest. I heard it's incredible.
It's pretty great. Are you ever come out here for conferences and stuff?
I haven't flown that far out, no.
So there's PAX West is a good one. I'm planning to submit a couple of panels this year for PAX.
Nice.
I used to do them a lot. I'm gonna try to get some of the educators in the Educators Guild to come out and talk about what they're doing.
Yes. All right, folks are starting. I have to admit people manually. So
Okay. Do I talk to them, or are they in the background?
oh no, they're actually here in the meet. Hey Pep. Hey.
Great.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah.
Very cool. I have not attended any of these live yet, so this is my first rodeo.
Nice. Yeah. This is a new program. We've only done, I don't know, half a dozen of these, and it's kind of just evolving. So we're throwing stuff at the wall and we see what sticks. So I might change this, but right now, to more of a webinar format where it's like there's like a stage and it's a little better man. Right now, this is just like a bread and butter Google Meet I'm recording, which probably isn't the most ideal way to do it. But we're getting recordings working, and so far nothing's blown up. So
That's
hey,
good.
Bill. Christopher's here. Welcome. How's the weather out that way?
In Seattle, this is like the 3 months of the year that Seattle is beautiful. Between rainy season, and rainy season.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's the reputation out there.
Yes,
Yeah.
it doesn't rain a lot. It just rains all the time.
Oof.
So it's not like monsoon season. It's just like you're always a little bit wet.
Yeah. Good for the garden.
Someone from Texas took me a little while to get used to.
Yeah. 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 I spent some time in China, in Shenzhen near Hong Kong, and Oh my gosh, monsoon season. It was so like I couldn't get my clothes dry. You know, you'd put them outside. It was like 3 days later, like still wet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And out here in Cleveland, it's also, man, sunshine data is just brutal. It's like by the end of winter, the dark months, the 5 months of darkness, you come out a little like Northern Europe. Maybe Pep could relate. Everyone's just so starved for sunlight. We're just like, whenever there's like a sunny day, it's like, oh my god.
Oh, it's like that here right now. So in the winter times, the sun will set at 4:30, and then in the summertime it sets at 9:30. So it's very disorienting toward the biological clock to be eating dinner when it's been dark for 3 hours, and then in the summer season, it's like you eat dinner and then you go to bed. Like I put my kids to bed, and my daughter's like, "Why is the sun still up?" Good question.
Yes. Oh, Ian Greener's joining us. Very good. Brian Adams here. All right, we've got some all stars and some regulars. Welcome everybody. Professor Greener's here. Mr. Adam Watson, good to see you, sir.
And Adam
Right,
is in the chat.
Ryan McLaughlin, very good. Welcome everybody. We'll be starting shortly. I'm just admitting guests. It's still a manual process. Jesse DeRose from Stanford. Yay. Bailey's here, all the way from Turkey. I love the community that's emerging for this thing. This is so cool. It's so global and so all over the place. Um, yes, Chris Hopper from Texas. I feel like we should move to Twitch or something. Yeah, something with the weather. We were just talking about the weather, and I think it is something with places that have a lot of darkness tend to also find time to do TTRPGs, right? Because we're shut in for so long. So it's like no question why Dungeons and Dragons came about in like Wisconsin, right? We played a lot of it in northern Michigan, where I'm from, up in the UP, and it was just like literally like you wake up and it's dark, you go to school, it's dark, you come home, it's dark, it's like let's just roll some dice, get the fire going. And all right, folks. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is Tabletop EDU's Fellowship Friday. Today, we have a super special guest for you, the legendary Adam Davis. The title I've given this is Games That Heal, Teach, and Build Community. And that just captures some of the work that Adam's done in this space for something like the last 15 years. So Adam's been doing this for a very, very long time, has been a part of really shaping the field and the industry of applied games as we know it in many ways. We're going to go over some of that origin story today and also catch up with what he's doing currently. Really exciting things with the incredible group Foundry10 out in the state of Washington. He's joined us from Seattle. Thank you all for joining us. We do this every Friday, or most Fridays, around noon Eastern time. And we try to get folks from across the field of applied TTRPGs, specifically for teaching and learning for education. If you have questions for Adam, feel free to use the chat. Drop your questions in the chat. We'll try to get to those. We try to keep this to around 30 minutes, but it often goes over. And if you want to hang out a little longer, you're certainly welcome to do that. And we always spill over into the Discord chat. Really briefly up front, we are Tabletop EDU. I'm Tabletop EDU, among a few others. We're a nonprofit group, and we are specifically focused on tabletop RPGs, role-playing games for teaching and learning, so specifically for educational spaces. And so Adam joins us. He's worked on applied TTRPGs from therapeutic spaces as well as educational spaces. And so we started this group to really try to create a space just for education, because the field is evolving and we need our own special space. We do all kinds of things at Tabletop EDU. We try to create community. The Discord's been taking off. We create resources, and we're also working on some of our own scholarship and publishing. You can follow us on LinkedIn, is where we're most active. We're trying to get out into some other spaces, and Discord as well. All right, let me introduce our guests here a little further, and then we'll hand it over to some questions for Adam. Let me admit a couple more guests. Okay. All right. So yes, and I didn't want to put another image of your headshot, because here you are in the chat, you're live with us. So I found your book. You've got a couple of them, I think, but this seemed like maybe the biggest one, Therapeutically Applied Role-Play Games, The Game to Grow Method. So there's a photo of maybe your most recent book. Maybe you'll correct me on that. Incredible 5-star reviews on Amazon. Hard to see that, hard to find that thing these days. Yeah, your current title is Games and Play Program Developer at Foundry10. You have a master's in education and drama therapy from Antioch University, Seattle. You studied popular participatory theater in South Africa. And then some of your history in this specific space. You co-founded Wheelhouse Workshop with Adam Johns, which was precursor to Game to Grow. You co-founded Game to Grow, a nonprofit, and you've trained thousands of therapists and professionals in therapeutic TTRPGs. That space is way ahead of educational TTRPGs. It's been cooking now, as I said, for something like 15 years. You're the co-creator of Critical Core, which is one of the breakout pieces that I know educators first learned about applied TTRPGs. We all found it in different spaces, but this was such a big moment for TTRPGs when Critical Core launched. You guys raised something like $2,500 on Kickstarter in 8 hours eventually, and you work with the Star Institute, Dr. Virginia Spielman. More recently, you're working with Foundry10. You've trained hundreds of librarians across Washington State as part of a statewide TTRPG initiative. And now at Foundry10, in youth leadership development, you do educator programs, library-based play, and I'm sure much more. It strikes me that you are just a force of nature when it comes to applying TTRPGs for the good of learning and growth. It doesn't matter where you are, you seem to keep kind of chasing that mission. So yeah, let's get into it, Adam. And thank you for joining us and sharing some of your wisdom and experience. We had a fantastic conversation for the first time just a couple weeks ago. And I'm so excited to meet you in person at Origins here at the conference coming up at the end of June. But tell us, where did this all start? How did you get started with TTRPGs? You know, what's the origin story you tell?
Well, I can start with my origin story as a kid, or I can start with my professional origin story. I think for the sake of time, I'll just do a little bit of my personal origin story. I think like a lot of us in tabletop role-playing games, especially in the applied field, we have a personal story of connection with it. Research will show that a lot of educators wanting to use games in the classroom, they started off as gamers, and that was true for me. I was definitely the lonely kid in a small town who found his way through RPGs. I was that kid who sat on the floor in the mall bookstore reading the Encyclopedia Magica and really hoping someday to find my tribe, right? I think a lot of us have had this similar kind of experience with TTRPGs. And so I found my way, I found a social group through TTRPGs, and then I found theater, and I got really involved in theater, and sort of that took me into drama therapy. But when I was in graduate school studying drama therapy, I had this opportunity. I was doing some volunteer work to sort of get myself out there. And then I was asked by another drama therapist, "You're not by chance a dungeon master, are you?" And so I said, "Well, sure. Why do you need a dungeon master?" So then I ended up running this after-school evening program, really designed for kids on the spectrum, but really just kids who needed a place to be themselves, right? So it's that same sort of story that I had when finding myself through TTRPGs. And so I came in as a facilitator, playing role-playing games while I was studying drama therapy in graduate school, and then realized that drama therapy is the systematic and intentional use of drama games and activities for insight, growth, and change. It turns out that tabletop role-playing games are just sit-down drama therapy. So I was really connecting what I was doing as a game master with what I was learning about in drama therapy school. And then when Adam Johns came in as my co-facilitator, he was my friend from class, and we did one of those things in one of our intro classes where we brought in something from our personal culture, and we both brought in dice. And we were like, oh, okay, both named Adam, both have dice. Okay, we're going to be friends. And so Adam and I were co-facilitating, and then we, from there, realized just how powerful what we were doing was. I mean, we didn't have any theories yet. We were kind of learning as we were going. And what we found out later, what we were building was really the roots of what became the Game to Grow method. We were building participation structures and ways of interacting with this work that allowed us to then really create some powerful change in the youth we were working with. So we started Wheelhouse Workshop. We were running games in the evenings while we both had side jobs. I was maybe it was our side job. It depends on how you reframe the story. But I was a full-time classroom teacher, and Adam was a full-time therapist in private practice while we were running RPG groups in the evenings, and then realized that this could be bigger than what we were doing. So then we, at that point, decided to shift into the nonprofit space and start Game to Grow. And that was 2016 or 17 is when we started Game to Grow.
Wow. So when you started using TTRPGs in therapeutic practice, had you heard of that being done before? Are you like the first documented folks to, I understand that role play has been used in therapy for a long time, but actually using, structured games, right? Like Dungeons and Dragons specifically. Do we have a record of that being done before?
Turns out a lot of people thought they invented it.
Okay.
That's kind of how the story goes. Adam and I, as we were getting more excited about this, we were putting in submissions and applications to go to present at conferences. And so we were really getting out there and talking about what we were doing. And then we had people in the audience who come up to us and go, I've actually been doing this for 20 years, and what turns out is that people had been doing it, but a lot of what had been happening is people were kind of keeping it in a silo. Their cool little project they were doing. Someday they were going to write a book about it and change the world. But then everybody was kind of keeping their cards close to their chest. And so we were one of the first ones to really put it out there in a big way and really try to do it with a rising tides approach. I wanted everyone to be doing this, not always to look at me as the one who was doing it, right? So that was kind of a shift in the ecosystem. So we found like Jack Birkenstock at the Bodhana Group had been focused on this for a long time. Hawk Robinson at RPG Research here in Spokane in Washington. People who'd been around and doing this for a long time were finally connecting and talking to each other and sharing ideas. And that was a big transition.
Wow. Yes, I love that. Yeah, sometimes people get really protective and defensive over some of this stuff, and I understand that. I do really appreciate and respect the approach you've taken, which is, as you said, sort of a rising tide lifts all boats approach, where it's almost more of an academic discourse, right? It's like to really advance how this stuff works, we need to creating community and sharing and publishing and so on. And so I definitely respect that. And it did seem like that was a real inflection point with much of that was what you guys did with Wheelhouse and Game to Grow. But let's transit. I could talk about this for hours. I'm so interested in how it works therapeutically. I did a course, How to Become a Therapeutic Game Master, about 5 years ago, right before I started TabletopEDU. And it was from, I think, a group called Geek Therapeutics. And I was very obviously I'm not a therapist or anything, but I was interested in what they had to say. And so I was unexpectedly moved by that. And so felt, hey, this stuff is really powerful and can really work, of course. But anyway, let me ask you more about switching to education, applied TTRPGs. And you were also not just a therapist, but a classroom instructor. And so where does that start to enter the picture more? And how do we get fast forward to like your work now in Foundry10?
Well, interestingly, my work has always kind of straddled therapy, education, and community settings. I was in graduate school originally planning to become a licensed counselor. That was my plan. I was going to go be a drama therapist working in clinical settings. And then partway through my graduate school program, I had kind of a personal crisis where I realized my first love was always education. And I really wanted to be, to quote my favorite childhood movie, I wanted to be where the people are, you know, and I wanted to be in classrooms. I wanted to be with larger populations of youth than those that were identified and put through a sort of pathology paradigm into a clinical setting. So I really wanted to be in the school setting. So my degree, I was the first and maybe only graduate from Antioch with a master's degree in drama therapy and education. Everyone else kind of went through marriage and family therapy or clinical counseling. So the thing that was happening at Game to Grow is we have had the training program is now at the Star Institute, and I still run trainings through them. But our training program was really oriented towards therapists and allied health professionals, and we always had educators coming through. We tried to create like a special lens for educators for a while, or for community settings for a while. But I realized that so much of what we were doing was really addressing kind of a universal need. A need for connection, a need for building community. I mean, one of the things that really inspired me to make this shift was during the lockdowns in 2020 and beyond. And then there was a publication by then Surgeon General Vivek Murthy around our epidemic of loneliness and isolation. His book Together really kind of clicked how much of what I was doing in this therapy space with the youth I was working with were really oriented towards loneliness and human connection. And that was something that we don't need to wait until we are identified as needing mental health support to solve this, right? This is also a community challenge. This is not something, I think we sometimes identify personal problems when really they are society's setbacks. And so I think about games in libraries or games in schools as ways of really shifting our paradigm around how we can engage together in safe, supportive, and enriching ways with play. And so that was a shift in 2024. Game to Grow, because of some connections we have to our Secretary of State here. We were brought on as trainers for librarians across the state of Washington. So I had an opportunity in 2024 to travel to 5 different regional libraries around the state and do trainings using Critical Core, but teaching librarians how to play neurodiversity affirming and trauma informed games around the state. And so that was like this really big shift for me, and kind of coming back home in a way, right? My first love was always being where the people are and helping people maybe who wouldn't otherwise cross paths be able to not just play together, but be like a fellowship of adventurers saving the world together. And so there was this really kind of click moment that happened there. So when I had an opportunity to join Foundry10, it was kind of a no-brainer in terms of how that is in so many ways able for me to be doing that work that it's always been top of my list.
Incredible. Yeah. Foundry, I'm very curious how it is, what you guys are up to at Foundry10. It feels like there's new things and exciting things underway, and you're leading a guild there, as I understand it. You're creating a guild of educators and whatnot. But what you've said, I just want to pause on for a second about the epidemic of loneliness, particularly in the U.S. The youth, people in general, but particularly young people talk about this, and also particularly men, right? You talk about, or young men in particular. There's a lack of third places and so forth for them to organize, and yet games have often been a space that is welcoming to these folks. Marianne, who joined us last week, talked about this. So her dissertation work, or not her dissertation work, but a prior study where she interviewed educators using TTRPGs in classrooms for what they found, and one of the common ideas she found, as I understand it, was that the students who played in those games felt much more connected with their community, with their peers, and with their school. And it's so interesting to think about how our modern education systems have created these bureaucracies and these systems where many students still feel so alone. They're in so many courses, they're with so many cohorts, they have all these relationships with instructors and students, and yet they still feel so alone and unknown. And so it just strikes me how powerful TTRPGs are as a kind of organic media to create community and to create a sense of kind of wellness and connection. It does so much more, right, than just the basic skills that we think about literacy practices as educators. Also, that kind of need to one, and also, and I'm speaking a little bit at length here, but I think about how libraries and schools are like front lines for a lot of these issues that young people are facing. I hadn't heard that before, that you had done training with librarians for trauma-informed practice. That's really interesting. I hadn't heard that before.
Well, an important approach to, I think, everything that I've always wanted to appeal to is a principle of universal design. You don't have to have people with accessibility needs in your group to provide them accessibility. I mean, it's a universal design. It reduces the labor of anyone having to advocate for themselves. I mean, you can you go for a walk and appreciate a good curb cut, right? There's some things that we have that are just universal design, and taking that principle of what's good for all is good for all, we can really do this with so much of how we run our games. There's principles of trauma-informed care and neurodiversity affirming practice that are really about transparency and consent and collaboration. These are all things that make games good. These are good games. And so some of the principles when I'm teaching this is not something you have to go, well, I don't have any veterans in my group, I therefore don't have to do trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed care is good for everybody. And you don't need to have anyone disclose any diagnosis or any personal experience before you just engage in these principles to make your game a better game.
That's interesting. Let me ask you, well, and I completely agree with you about UDL, universal design. Good design benefits all, right? When we have our Chris Hopper is in the group, who does a lot of fantastic work with accessibility, particularly in TTRPGs. He's worked on Draw, Steal, and others. So we might have to have Chris come and host a session somewhere down the road and talk about accessibility, which is often associated with UDL. What would you say? Let me ask you, and this is a tough question, and I don't know if what the answer might be, but what would you say to, as an educator who's working in the front lines in that regard? And I hear this from some of my faculty here at Cuyahoga Community College. They get a lot of this sort of mental health issues. That they have students coming to them with these issues, with not being able to focus on the work, with having problems at home, having problems in their personal life, this sort of thing. And so, and some faculty would say, I'm not trained to handle this stuff, right? Let me just refer it. Or let me create more boundaries, right? It's even pushed some faculty to say, I want to create less channels for me to work with. I have faculty who say, I much prefer working online because I don't have to have I don't have to deal with the students these days who are having all these issues. And again, I don't know what the answer to this, but what would be your response to that?
Well, gosh, I think it depends. And this is something I always say when I do the trainings in the game to grow method. When anybody asks me a question at the end, I say, well, I'm always going to say it depends and it's complicated. So, Gary, it depends and it's complicated. It depends on the situation. When there is someone who often, like, I'll just tell a story. When I was a classroom teacher, I had some kids in the neighborhood that I worked in. I had some kids who were very affluent and had tutors, right? And I had some kids who slept in their car. And I was not going to be the one who could solve the issues to help that kid not sleep in a car, right? So there's some of it is understanding my lane as an educator. But if I can sit next to that kid who sleeps in his car and give him some food, right? There's some things I can do. I can make sure I always have breakfast available in my classroom. That can address an issue. I can also be a safe person for that kid. I can also be there when that kid needs a place to sit and have lunch, right? There's some things that I can do. I can run my classroom in a cosmopolitan way where everyone has a job and feels like they are included. Those are things that I can do for that kid. And so there's some ways that we can think about, yes, we don't want to sit, we're not therapists. If you're not a therapist, don't be a therapist. It's an important thing. Yes. But also there are ways that you can provide safe and supportive community settings for everyone to feel like they're supported. And that's a thing that teachers can do. And that's one of the things that really we can do as facilitators of games. There's that magic circle where that kid who sleeps in a car can come in and be a powerful paladin hero that saves the world. And then we can start to see ourselves as more than the way that people often see us.
Beautiful. Yes, you brought it right back full circle. I think, and what's wonderful is what I love about TTRPGs in the classroom and in learning environments are that in a lot of ways, if it's done well, it distributes the work of teaching and instruction. You invite your students to become kind of peer instructors, right? In an ideal situation, perhaps I'm not sure what you feel, how you feel about this, but maybe those players become GMs, right, at some point by the end of it. So tell us, so what is happening currently? I know you've just had some approval for a new survey with the IRB, with Foundry. Was it a Foundry10 sponsored research program for libraries?
Actually, a partnership between Foundry10 and the University of Washington.
Well, tell us more. Yeah.
I mentioned sort of the shift to Foundry10. Really, some of the things Foundry10 is working on, and not just me, but as an organization, we're looking at games outside of the classroom, right? Learning outside the classroom in general. So libraries and museums are an area of focus because a lot of, you mentioned like this idea of the third place, not just for loneliness, but also as accessibility and resources for education. So because I did this work with the Washington State Libraries in 2024, I've been staying in touch with everybody and continuing to collaborate on this IMLS grant-funded opportunity. And so I've had a lot of relationships with librarians, and so I'm going to be doing a training for librarians this month later on, and I was creating a pre-learning survey to assess for gaps and interests and where the librarians are feeling like they might still have needs. And the research shows that oftentimes there's still first order challenges, right? There's time, there's budget, there's those kinds of things. Then there's also, I don't know why I should be doing this, right? This kind of, the relationship with this kind of education, I'm sure you see this with teachers too. Yes. There is people who have just finally gotten out of the hard part of early teaching and they have their curriculum. They don't want to do something new now. They just got out of the challenges of early teaching. So then you say, no, now I want you to use games. They would back up a little bit. So there's a little bit of this like motivation that might be missing there to disrupt the curriculum. But then there's also just the skills. There are plenty of gamers who would love to incorporate their games into their classroom or into their library setting, and they need the skills and the frameworks for how to do that well. So I was creating this pre-learning survey for this particular group of Washington State teen librarians, Seattle area. And then we were talking at Foundry10 and realizing that this is good data that could be broadcast statewide. I mean, Foundry10's focus is Washington State. So we put together this formative research survey through the IRB, and we're distributing it around the state now to collect data for librarians in general. What are their interests and what are their obstacles and what are the motivations that pull them towards this? Because, if teachers incorporate games into the classrooms because they're gamers, then we need to be at the game store. We need to be convincing gamers in the game store, teachers in the game store, how to get games in the classroom. If they're in their classrooms wanting to use games, but they don't have a background in games, and that approach to supporting and training them to use games is going to be a little bit different. So we're trying to lay the land and figure out where we can best support these educators and librarians.
Beautiful. Yeah, the data-driven approach is very important. And no, I think there's so many channels in here, right? We have educators who are interested in this kind of thing, librarians and classroom instructors included. And then we have young people who are interested in it as well. And, like we were talking about earlier, we have, this epidemic of loneliness. And at the same time, it's almost like people are reaching out for ways to connect and to be human together, especially in the age of AI and kind of and all the screen time. It's interesting when you talk to young people, there's like, it's not a majority, but there's a movement to put their phones down more and to get off social media. And there's a movement back towards some analog stuff. And so dice are kind of cool again, and TTRPGs are kind of cool again. And yet it's one of those things that I think is hard to pick up. It's hard to start learning how to play. And so there's some structural challenges. So it strikes me that libraries are such an awesome platform and a venue, a place that's open to anybody, to go and perhaps learn how to play or find a group. So it strikes me as just a really thoughtful and hopefully effective way to go about spreading the good stuff here. So besides participating in that survey, and you're looking for data, who should participate? Is it people who are librarians?
Librarians, not just people who work in public libraries, but also school libraries in academic settings. Librarians in general is the big call to action there. And it's our focus is the state of Washington. If you are not in the state of Washington, it won't kick you out of the survey. So you can still fill out the data.
And I believe there's another or a related research project happening in concert with Wisconsin library system that's doing a kind of a national survey. Maybe they've concluded they haven't published it yet. But
that's being launched at the American Library Association conference coming up in Chicago. So that's the project that I'm still connected to. That was a big part of the IMLS grant that got me to go train librarians, was that process. So we are actually putting together a even larger formative research survey, but that's not looking just at TTRPGs. That's looking at game-based library programming, including games in circulation and including games, digital games. So it's a much broader survey around, and it's even looking at librarians and understanding how they see their mission, and if distribution of games could be something included into their programming, much like eventually librarians added audiobooks and DVDs and things like that into circulation. Can we see a world in which they can give video games out too? And then we've got digital games, which then become a big problem around how to solve this problem of distribution. But this is the kind of the project and the idea.
Yes. Well, I have extremely high expectations that we're going to figure this thing out. I just love seeing a bunch of like dedicated, smart people get together and try to solve problems and work together. And so that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing you be a part of consistently for a very long time. So it's very cool to see some levers emerging in the movement. Well, it's 12:30. Let me look at some. If folks have questions for Adam, feel free to drop them. Let me. What would you leave us with? And our final question is, what are you excited about? What's happening at maybe Foundry10 or otherwise? What's coming up that has you excited?
Well, there are so many things that are exciting right now in this field. If we take the field and we look at educational, therapeutic, community RPGs, just RPGs in general, and how this space, I mean, honestly, when I shifted into focusing on educators more explicitly, I saw so many people reach out and want to connect. I mean, Adam Watson, who's here, Marianne Cullinan, who was here last week, both came in and guest talked to my cohort of educators, the Educators Guild. Really cool to see where this field is going. And when I started doing this, we had Twitter, right? But there wasn't quite the tools that exist now to bring people together. So I'm loving seeing this thing that you're doing right here, Garrett. This is, I think, where the whole thing needs to go, is people coming together. I mean, you mentioned earlier sort of that rising tides approach. One of the things that when Adam and I gave a presentation at PAX East, pre-COVID, we asked everybody to raise their hand if they had ever been interested in or tried to use RPGs in their setting, and that was open to teachers, etc. All these hands went up. We said, look around the room. These are not your competitors. These are your collaborators. This idea that we are all stronger together. And so what I love is seeing groups like this, more people than I can count, coming together, excited about leveraging the power of games in their setting. And I think that's the thing that makes me the most excited, Garrett, is the willingness to keep putting things out there and bring people together.
Beautiful. Yes, I can't agree more, and I can't say it better. Thank you for being a part of this and really being a leader in the field. Yeah, it's one of the things that I love about the TTRPG community is it is so just supportive and open. And unlike, I think, a lot of like digital games and big tech who try to kind of control and copyright and monetize everything, TTRPGs, it's like, what are you gonna do? Like right. you can't copyright, you can't, it's like, and what people care about here is the experience of playing together and the community that it creates, I think. And if you've done it for a long time, it changes you, and it changes you in a really good way. And that's, of course, the growth you often talk about. There was a question. Let's get, if we've got a couple minutes, and I know we're over time. Maybe we'll try to hit some of these questions, and I'm going to open this to anybody who wants to chime in here. A question: is it TTRPGs specifically that come with the benefits that we're outlining, or do you think other kinds of games can do it as well? Is there any special sauce in TTRPGs? I definitely have some thoughts on this, but I don't know if anybody else wants to take that on first.
Yeah. So I think what TTRPGs have, and not all TTRPGs do, but TTRPGs that have a facilitator, I think is a really, really important part of the process for how we structure and scaffold the experience, I think, in a way that other games don't have. And it can be used, with great power comes great responsibility. So I think the power of the game master is pretty paramount in this process, especially in the therapeutic context. I think in the educational space, there's a way to sort of diffuse it a little bit more. But when you have something like a therapeutic game master, which is something I've been on my LinkedIn, for a decade plus, I think that there is something special. And when I do trainings for therapists, I generally say, please be the game master, because that's where you can shift and change the story as you need to. I've also used other types of tabletop games in practice. So I have helped young people build some regulation by playing Flux, right? The game where the rules are always changing and you can't ever be attached to anything. So that game I've used like code names and snake oil to talk about perspective taking. So there's some really great games out there that kind of help us do our kind of social calisthenics a little bit to build on some of those skills.
Beautiful. Well said. Yeah. And it's that facilitator, the game master role that it's a tough nut to crack. We're doing a survey with librarians as well and talking with them about a resource, a book we're working on as well. And one of the things they talk about is we have a real demand for this. We have people who want to play this. I'm intimidated and I get this from educators too. I am intimidated to be a game master or to run this in a learning environment. And so there's been an interest in like GM-less games, right? And this is sort of a popular format of micro TTRPGs. We kind of try to distribute it and take turns, or board games. There could be more role play focused board games that are less procedural and more about picking up roles and taking turns. And there's some great examples. Roll for Learning. We had Camilla Zamboni on here who talked a bit about her collection a couple weeks back, which is a fantastic resource. But yeah, I would just say I love, as an educator and kind of being in the space. To me, it is the role play elements that work in tabletop role play games that make it so powerful, and it's the ability to kind of work with identity. It's such a powerful lens in which we understand the world, and how our cognition has evolved as social animals, that we think about things in terms of who we are and who others are. And so the invitation to like take on a different role it kind of just opens people up and puts us in that state of play where we're receptive to learning, and we're able to do things where oftentimes, especially young people, I feel, are so kind of stressed out or shut down or uncertain of their identity still emerging and it's still in flux. And so inviting them,
one of the tricky things here you're tagging into also is the fact that younger kids are really open to play. They have recess and playgrounds, and they have imagination space that is in abundance. And then something happens around adolescence where there's maybe a little bit more apprehensiveness. They feel less empowered to play. And so then we, as often, I say we very generally, but we as well-meaning support people, put them in groups where we say, okay, we're going to learn how to make eye contact. Right? You need some social support. We better put you in a group where we train you now, instead of having play groups like a lot of young people do. So what's really beautiful and magical about tabletop role-playing games is it's access to a playground. Mm-hmm. It is a unstructured narrative social space, much like when we used to play like cops and robbers on the playground, right? Now you're just doing that, but we have dice and we have structure and we have that kind of the constraints that help us feel collaborative, where when you're a kid, the freedom of the playground is liberating. For a teenager, the freedom of the playground becomes a little bit anxiety inducing, but now we've got structure, we've got things we can choose to do on our turns, which we don't always do in a tabletop role-playing game, but there's the choice to engage in structure, and those constraints really support us to be collaborative. And I think that's a big part of what makes tabletop games so magical for those adolescents and emerging adults, is that it's access to something that feels very scary, but now it's done through this magic circle of the game.
Beautiful. Well put. I love how you put that about access to a playground. And it's a playground that people of all ages, you know, it's a wonderful alibi, an excuse to play, and of course to come together, right? It gives us an excuse to get together, especially as adults, which we need to. There's a great question about group size here. It's an interesting one. What's the biggest group size you can manage with your approach, and how do you manage that in the context of a public space like a library? So what? And I wonder if you've got anything to add on that, Adam. But I understand this is an issue that Katie, who is somebody who's collaborating with us, she's a youth librarian programmer, addresses, and she has a whole chapter she's writing about managing very large size groups, and she runs a program called Monster of the Week, and it's just because she's had this huge groundswell, groups of 20 kids that come in that want to play, and she just doesn't have GMs to run these things. So what she does is she just runs, hey, we're going to take on a Minotaur this week, and go check out the books, learn how to create your character, come and show up, and I'll help you a little bit. But and then she kind of trains kids how to play over time, and they eventually splinter off to run their little groups. But she just starts with like D&D 5e. Here are the rules. Here are the books. Here's the go do some research on the Minotaur this week and come back Friday, and we're going to get in groups, and everyone's going to get a turn to take a swing or whatever. So that's one approach. But yeah, that's a tough again. That's a tough question.
That is a question that I have received from so many educators. Is that great? You can run a game for 4 to 6 kids. I have 30. This is a very common thing. And this I'm just going to do a plug right now for Adam Watson's book. If you have it handy, Adam, will you hold it up? TTRPGs in the classroom. Hold on. I knew Adam was going to have it. So my Educators Guild, which I mentioned earlier. I'll give a brief background to what this Educators Guild is while Adam's you got your blur on, but that's it. You can see it. It's a great resource. But in Adam's book are some frameworks, and I'm a big fan of creating frameworks because then they help distill what's really ultimately a very complicated thing into a much more simple to understand thing. So part of my Educators Guild, which is where I took 15 educators from around the state of Washington, flew them to Seattle, gave them a full day training in TTRPGs, including some pre-learning videos that I made years back. And I gave them some resources. So I gave the TabletopEDU book, Garrett, and I gave Adam Watson's book, and I gave them a copy of Critical Core. And in this book, Adam has some frameworks in there that are really useful for how you can incorporate elements of TTRPGs without needing to feel like you are running Curse of Strahd for 30 people. And there's, I think, a lot of pressure that a lot of teachers feel to run the rules as written, to run the game as you might expect to see it played for 4 to 6 people. And I think what's really important is that you don't actually have to do that to get the magic of the game. So the other plug I'll give is for Critical Core, this is the map of the world of Critical Core in my background, which is why I'm pointing behind me. This is the world of Tovarus. And criticalcore.org is where you can find that. And this is the Therapeutic RPG Beginner's Box that we created, kickstarted in 2019. So this was really the kind of distillation of a lot of what I mentioned earlier, Adam and I had been working on for years and years. We would go to presentations and talk about the life-enriching magic of playing playing Dungeons and Dragons. And then we were actually keynote presenters at the Washington Association of Marriage and Family Therapy, talking about the power of tabletop role-playing games. And we had all these therapists come up to us afterwards and say, I want to do this, but I've never played RPGs before. And we were like, okay, well, I guess you should go to a game store, pick up a $50 book, read it, find some people who might be interested in playing with you. That'll take, 6 months before you'll really get good at doing this. Then you're going to become a game master. Then you're going to work at being a good game master. And then you've got to be good at being a good game master for sensitive populations. So you're like a year and a half out. And they were like, okay, never mind. I'm just going to go back to doing whatever I was doing. So we realized there was this real need to support new game masters and new players. And so we really, what Adam and I did in coordination with Virginia Spielman, who's now runs the Game to Grow training program at Star, we wanted to build something for that population. So we really took the way we were playing D&D with stripped down rules. And because there was the open gaming license that allowed us to do that, we basically published what we were doing in our group. So there's no character creation. There's some really stripped down understanding of the rules with some simpler language. And that's now for sale digital. And there's, I think, some still physical kits left from the Kickstarter. But that is the thing we let out into the world. It was funded very quickly. There was clearly a need for it. We had some really fantastic support from an ad agency in Hong Kong, McGarry Bowen, who was engaging with us as a active service to get this out there into the world. And so what we ended up seeing afterwards, we really built this beginner's box really to serve the population we'd been serving, right? A neurodivergent population looking for an opportunity to find community and connection. But since it's been out there, I've had people reach out saying they're using it in a youth correctional facility. They're using it with veterans, with adult veterans. I used this recently to teach literacy to 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. Like, it's really a broad thing because it has a really interesting way of designing stories that really is something that I took from script writing, being a theater kid. So that the way that the adventures are designed in there really are pulled from classic tools of script writing and scene writing. So it's something that I feel tremendously proud of as a tool for how people can get into the game, so to speak. So I think this is one thing. When we trained librarians, I gave everybody a copy of Critical Core as a way of helping those librarians feel more confident. So much of what is blocking game masters from doing this is this feeling like there's so many rules, I don't know how to do it just like Matt Mercer.
Right.
And you don't have to. You don't have to do it. And Matt Mercer told me to say that. So it's
yeah.
We were going to ask the question, Garrett, about how we were so successful in our Kickstarter. Matt Mercer tweeted about it.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
There's
that'll do it.
One of those things that can happen when you back a Kickstarter where it says, do you want to tweet this or Facebook this? And the tweet, 3 clicks from Matt Mercer meant that we were fully funded in 8 hours.
Yeah, it's crazy how, like, the value of that, like having run a Kickstarter, like how much money it costs to get your program out, like to buy the clicks with Meta. You know, it's like either you're paying to get in front of people, you know, because how the internet works, or if you've got a platform, you just need like a little bit of juice. And I think we spent $20,000 on advertising for our Kickstarter. Like, it was like, this is what it took to get where we was. Anyway, incredible stuff. And you put your finger on one of the biggest issues, and we're going to wind down here because I know we're over time. But one of the biggest challenges with bringing rules-heavy TTRPGs into the classroom, which is there's just too much for most students in a mainstream classroom. It's too complex to get everybody going quickly, and not everybody is ready to deal with a full crunchy system and all that. But we don't need to have the huge system, to get a lot of the good stuff out of it. And there's a lot here to outline and delineate. But yeah, you can get them going with just the most basic rules. And there's many ways to approach it. Bailey had a great suggestion: integrating voting as a mechanic helped me facilitate TTRPGs in a group of 16 students for my JMUN and debate club, and I can imagine it being scaled for a complete class. Beautiful. And Adam Watson sharing the degree of TTRPG facilitation framework. I love that. Love that framework you published. And he's posted his website, which is chock full of great wisdom. And yes, Adam mentions Origins, and that's a great segue out. And we have, speaking of the Minotaur, found our way to perhaps the end of the session here. Thank you again so much for joining us, Adam. And we're going to be seeing each other a little bit this summer. I hope some of you can join us in person. The next time we'll be together in person is at the Origins Game Fair, June 19th to 21st. We'll be down in Columbus, Ohio, at the big convention center. We have a wonderful little mini conference, the GBET conference, which is on the second floor up there attached to the game convention center. I think it's only like 20 extra bucks on top of the normal entrance fee, which is like 80 bucks or something for the game fair. So as far as a conference, it's extremely affordable, an academic conference. The website here, I think, is linked. You'll be presenting, I'll be presenting, Adam Watson's presenting, Marianne Conan, everybody. Susan Harmon's going to be there. It's going to be a motley crew and a who's who. We're also going to be together in July at the Play Make Learn conference in Madison, Wisconsin. Join us there. You can also join us here just about every Friday for our Fellowship Friday. You can at least join me. And let me just share these slides with everybody. So you have all the links and stuff here. I'm going to put it in the chat. I'll put it in the Discord. Here is our program coming up, so you can see who's next. Let's see. Yeah, next week is Chris Baker from Wisconsin DPI, who's also on that. I think he's the president-elect of ALA, as a matter of fact, and is associated with some research on TTRPGs in libraries and museums. Really bright guy. And then the next week after that, Keaton Wadzinski will be here, and then Sarah White, who I think Adam knows from Washington State Library, also very experienced TTRPG and library programmer. So we are leaning into libraries over the next several months, and we'll be developing actually some resources in the form of a book we're going to be launching this fall called Adventures in the Stacks. And so we haven't officially announced this yet, but we'll do so at the end of May. But you heard it here first. And we've got a number of incredible people working on this, including Adam Davis himself and many others. So watch out for that coming this May. Thank you guys for joining us. Keep the conversation rolling in Discord. Adam, keep doing exactly what you're doing, and let us know whatever we can do to help your awesome mission. So thank you. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for coming out.
See you next time.